podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
What's good, boys and girls? Welcome back to Two Footed Extra, and this is our news and gossip portion of today. So let's start with the news. UEFA has lowered the price caps for away fans at European ties. This is good news for everybody. So Champions League games will be capped at €60, with €40 the maximum for the Europa League and €20 for Conference League games. Next season, that's this season, next season, it'll be €50 for the Champions League, €35 for the Europa League, and I assume the Conference League will stay at £20. Those caps are obviously only for visiting supporters, so away fans. Now, the hope here is that clubs don't decide to try and make that money up by hammering their own fans and raising the prices of home tickets. That's something that everybody's going to have to monitor and keep their clubs in line on. But this is good news. This is good news. Fans pay too much. And when you're traveling in Europe especially, you're already paying flights, transport, potentially hotels. There has to be some sort of relief. And if you're a fan of a club that's going to have a long run in Europe, especially now with the Champions League, Europa League and Conference League all being expanded in the way they have with these new group stages or league stages, like it's extra games, it's extra money that people are having to pay. And remember, football is largely a working class sport. And in terms of those that support the game and those that travel to away games in particular, it is the working class that do that. You'll get your well-to-do people that will come to home games and sit in their nice cushy seats. They don't care about what the price is. They're happy to pay it. They have the money, they can afford it. But for Joe Soap, who works, whatever job he works, every single penny counts. And if he can get to his game a little bit cheaper, that's a good thing. Nobody should be in any way confused about that. Wales have called up Leeds teenager Charlie Crew for their Nations League games against Turkey and Montenegro. He's yet to make his Leeds debut, but he has been called up with Rabi Matondo forced out of the squad due to an injury. Matondo's had a tough old time, very talented player, but he's never quite been able to show what he's capable of on a consistent basis. There's a really interesting piece here that Phil McNulty has done, almost like a mailbag thing. He's gotten in some fan opinions on the Everton game. He's gone and asked for questions on Everton and everything to do with them right now, how they're playing, how they stand. And the first question I saw was from @JoeJonesEverton. I would like your views on Dyche being relieved of his duties immediately, and if so, who could come in? Moyes is available. Dyche 100% has to go, but the question is, who should replace him? I mean, Moyes would likely be the one that they would go for because they'll want some sort of feel-good factor, and Moyes is good at keeping teams in the Premier League, but so is Sean Dyche. Like, Dyche just had a really poor start to the season, unquestionably. The coaching, the team selections, the preparation, all of it has been off. But to sack him after 3 games would be a little bit strange, considering when you look at last season, I know they had the points deducted. And obviously that played a part in where they finished in the league table last season. But if we take those points and give them back to Everton, you're giving them back 8 points. They finished with a -11 goal difference. So they would have finished in 12th position between Brighton and Bournemouth. Now, Brighton had a disappointing season last year, but I think everybody was fairly enthused by where Bournemouth looked to be going. And yet, Everton actually had, on the pitch, a better season than them. They had the 4th best defence in the league. Better than Villa, better than Spurs, better than Chelsea, better than Newcastle, better than United. They just couldn't score goals. They're the 2nd worst attack in the league. That was their issue. Now, Iliman and Jai will help when they get Broja up and running. He should help a bit, though he is another big, tall number 9 who doesn't score a ton of goals, but he should help a bit. I don't know what Everton should do. I don't think Dyche is the biggest problem there, though. Like, there's so much turmoil with the ownership situation. We're a year now? Is it a full year since the whole 777 thing started? Maybe even a little bit more. Like, it's been most of his tenure at the club. That's really difficult for any manager to work under. Completely unsure of whether or not he's going to have this player or that player after a certain window. Unsure on what he can spend and how he can spend. Like, they didn't know until the deadline closed that they were keeping Branthwaite. So, I don't know. I don't think sacking Dyche is the answer, but he himself does need to improve. Erik ten Hag has made some very, very strange statements after yesterday's defeat to Liverpool. He said he was not Harry Potter in response to a question asking whether Manuel Ugarte would improve the team. He said that he was asked, are you concerned about the frequent mistakes and the repeated mistakes that your team are making? And he said, he kind of laughed it off. Well, what repeated mistakes are we making? And the journalist who asked the question must have given him a list of about 10. And he didn't really scratch the surface on the repeated issues in how Ten Hag sets his team up. And this is the same man who, you know, has basically claimed that over the last 2 seasons, only Man City have done better than United, despite United's pathetic campaign in the Premier League last season, where they lost 14 league games and finished with a goal difference of -1, sat in 8th position and only made Europe because City bottled the cup final. So, all things considered, he looks to me like a fella that knows his time is running out. And I thought Carragher made a really good comparison yesterday on Sky when he talked about how Brendan Rodgers should have been sacked at the end of the 14-15 season. Liverpool kept him because the manager they wanted wasn't ready to take the job at that point. And when he made the call in October and said, right, I'm ready now, they sacked Rodgers and brought in Klopp. I've said since the summer, I think the only reason Ten Hag survived is because Southgate wouldn't take the job, or because they would have had to wait for Southgate until after the Euros, and likely Southgate wanted a break after walking away from the England job. I think we get to October kind of time, unless United have put together 6-7 wins in a row, I think they're going to sack him and bring in Southgate. I think that's what Dan Ashworth wants to do. I think it's what Jim Ratcliffe wants to do. I don't think it's the right move. I don't think he's a good manager, but I think that's what they're going to look to do. There may be somebody else, but we know Tuchel already turned the job down. Nagelsmann is going to stay with Germany until the World Cup. Ruben Amorim is not going to leave mid-season. So where do you really turn to? Xavi, maybe? Doesn't seem like the right kind of... Well, I suppose he walked into turmoil at Barcelona and won a league title, but doesn't seem like the right environment for him. The player profile certainly isn't great for him either. Mainly would fit well. You could see him doing well with someone like Garnacho, but a lot of the others don't fit well at all into what Xavi would want to do. It's going to be Southgate. I think it's going to be Southgate. I don't see why Thomas Tuchel would take it now if he wouldn't take it in June. So, who's the alternative? I think it has to be Southgate. I think that's an atrocious bit of management from the club. Casemiro's wife has hit back at the criticism he's faced. Look, unfortunately for Casemiro, he is no longer the player he was. He was phenomenal. Those days are long gone. He is now a shell of himself, and he's now playing in a country where footballers are scrutinised at a much different level and in a much different way. So I understand why he's maybe struggling a bit to deal with the type of criticism he's coming in with. Kevin De Bruyne says he had no talks about leaving Manchester City. That goes against a lot of the reporting that we heard over the summer, but you have to take him at his word, because he's never given anything or given us any evidence that he's not an honest and open person. Pep Guardiola says Phil Foden is unlikely to join the England squad because he is carrying an injury. What else do we have here in terms of news? Let's check that. Celtic gave Rangers a smacking at the weekend, which was wonderful for everybody. Obviously, Saul Bamba passed away last week as well, and a lot of tributes coming in for him. His wife revealed that he had suffered a relapse of his cancer diagnosis and had been living with cancer for the last couple of years. He took on a job in the summer as the manager of, I want to say, Adanaspor. I'm just going to check that is right. I think it was Adanaspor in Turkey. Yeah, Adanaspor. He took that job on, I think, in July. Let's see now. Yeah, July. And then passed away last week. Obviously, things progressed quite quickly there. Tough. A good player, a model pro, a long career. Made his debut in 2004-05 season for PSG. Didn't make the grade at PSG. Went to Dunfermline. Did well there. Went down with them. Stayed with them. Got a move to Hibs. Did really well at Hibs. Earned a move to Leicester. Did well with Leicester. Got a move to Trabzonspor. Went to Palermo. It didn't work in Palermo for him. Joined Leeds. Was very good for Leeds. Had a really good 15-16 season. Went back down with them. Stayed with them. Obviously, that's when he had his first cancer diagnosis. And times were very tough for him. And it looked grim at the time. But he pulled through. He went on and played for Middlesbrough in his final season. And by the sounds of what his wife has said, his cancer returned either during his final season or after his final season. And unfortunately he passed away. But a lot of tributes coming in for a guy who was very, very, very popular. And these are his words. I love defending. Absolutely love it. When I go into a game, I set myself a target. I don't want to lose a header anywhere on the pitch. Sometimes I see defenders and I ask myself, does he actually like defending? But I love going into a tackle, winning a header or a challenge. That's why it's good here, because the fans appreciate that. In France or in England, when you do a good defensive tackle, they're not bothered. But here, they like that, and that makes me want to defend even more. Now, I would disagree with him about the Italian part, because the Italians love defending, but maybe not the type of defending that Saul Bamba was primarily known for. He had begun his career as a defensive midfielder who booted people up in the air, moved to centre-back to make senior level, and proceeded to boot people up in the air. 46 caps for the Ivory Coast, though you can't argue with it. It all worked out very well for him. Jamal Lewis of Newcastle United is on the verge of a shock move to Brazilian giants Sao Paulo. 26-year-old joined Newcastle in 2020 for 15 million and is understood to be in Brazil finalising the move. Whilst neither club has confirmed the transfer, Northern Ireland manager Michael O'Neill revealed the move was on the cards. Jamal is planning to join us later in the week after he completes his visa requirement and medical checks in Brazil. Fair play to him. I think that's an awesome move. I genuinely love that. He's a good player as well. He's a good player. Been unfortunate with injuries. Right, we've got Troy Deeney's team of the week. Then we'll go to break and come back with the gossip. He's gone with Alisson in goal. Didn't have a ton to do. Made two good saves. One of them was fairly easy. Bogard at right back, fair. Collins at centre back, he had a good game. He's gone with Van Dijk. Van Dijk was excellent, but Konate was even better. He's picked Andy Robertson. Now, Robertson had a decent game, but he was the weak link in the Liverpool back four, so he shouldn't be in. Midfield, he's gone with Bellegarde. He scored a goal. He's gone with Onana. He scored a goal. He's gone with Eze. He scored a goal. I don't have an issue with Salah. Diaz didn't play all that well. Like, Diaz was much better against Ipswich and got hammered for his performance. But he scored 2 yesterday. So that's why he's in. And then he's picked Haaland, and there's no issue picking Haaland. So, again, as with the previous teams that Troy has done, he hasn't watched many games. He's just picked lads who scored. Right, we will go to break, and when we come back, we have the gossip. Right, welcome back. So, the funniest part of gossip, of course, is that most of it has been a window that's 4 months away, but there are some about deals that can still happen with Saudi Arabia and Turkey and places like that. Looks like Victor Osimhen is going to Galatasaray, which is just bizarre, but understandable that he wants to stay in Europe. Galatasaray affords him Champions League football. He gets to live in Istanbul, so I can see why it would appeal. Liverpool explored the possibility of signing Victor Osimhen in the summer transfer window, but were put off by his huge salary demands. I could see it being true. It's not a secret that the current hierarchy are not overly enamoured with Darwin Núñez, and potentially we're offering Núñez and a bit of cash, or maybe Núñez straight up for Osimhen. Napoli have played the Osimhen thing about as badly as a club possibly could have, and I believe the offer that they had on the table from Chelsea was a loan with an obligation to buy for about 40 million less than his release clause, and they considered it, but he wouldn't take the move because Chelsea couldn't give him the right wage option, or the right wages. So it is what it is. But I do think if Liverpool were inquiring about somebody from Napoli, it wouldn't be him. It would be Kvaratskhelia. Newcastle right back Kieran Trippier might head to one of several interested clubs in Saudi Arabia, with the 33-year-old keen to leave the northeast. Al Ettifaq seems like the fit for him. Go and play for Steven Gerrard. We'll see. Newcastle have dismissed reports that Trippier wants to leave the club. It's some talks, but I wouldn't pay much heed. Manchester United are looking to sign Anthony Robinson for 30 million. I mean, he's a fine player. He's not one of the best, one of the better left backs in the league. You could do a lot better. I think he's a player that if West Ham signed him, I'd think that's a good signing for West Ham. That's kind of what he is. Willian has flown to Athens with Olympiacos keen to sign him. I could see that being a good move for him. Good lifestyle, big club, European football for certain. Yeah. Sevilla appear to have been priced out of a move to sign Memphis Depay, who's attracting interest from across Europe after leaving Atletico Madrid. So obviously he's a free agent now, so can sign for anybody. But I'd imagine his wage demands are quite high, and Sevilla are always in a financial mess. Ivan Toney will earn £403,000 per week, the equivalent of $800,000 a week before tax in the UK, after moving to Al Ahly from Brentford. As I said repeatedly, I could understand why he wanted the move, because he's earned pittance in his career, relatively speaking. But he never got a contract after they got promoted. They should have given him a massive contract after he got them into the Premier League, and they didn't. So he was always on his championship contract, which probably had kickers. But still, I think he was like the 17th highest paid player at Brentford last year, despite being by far the best player at Brentford. Earning championship money in the Premier League for 3 years, having earned lower league money all his career before that. Yeah, understandable. There's a piece there then about Jamal Lewis and Sao Paulo. Roma are closing in on a deal for Mario Hermoso, who is a free agent after leaving Atletico Madrid in the summer. Oxford forward Mark Harris is still on the radar of Bundesliga new boys Holstein Kiel, who tried to sign him this summer. Roma are also in talks to sign Mats Hummels as they seek to replace Chris Smalling, who's heading to Saudi Pro League club Al Fayed. Do you know, Chris Smalling is proof for any kind of middle of the road player in the Premier League. that you can go abroad and play for a big club in a league that's not as strong as the Premier League. And Smalling, to his credit, was largely very good for Roma. Now, last season he was woeful. But on the season he was there on loan and the 3 seasons thereafter, he was pretty good for them. He had one injury-plagued season. I can't remember which one it was. Last season he was desperate. It was clear that, as Carragher would say, the football had left him. But, you know, he was a squad player at United for years and years and would get blamed for things that weren't his fault, like mistakes that others would make. And he chose to go to Roma on loan, took a chance, and now we're seeing more and more Premier League players go abroad, especially to Italy. You know, we've seen Tammy Abraham go over, we've seen Ruben Loftus-Cheek go over, and he's done pretty well. So, yeah, I think it's something that more and more players should consider. And finally then, former Stoke midfielder Daniel Johnson is in advanced talks to join Istanbulspor, not a club I'm overly familiar with. Daniel Johnson is actually best known for his spell with Preston, where he was for 8 years. He came through the Villa Academy. He's at was at Palace and then went to Villa, came out of their academy into the senior team. Don't know that he ever played for them, but he had a few loans. And then he went to Preston and was really good for them for 7 or 8 years. And then had last year with Stoke. Played for Jamaica for the last few years as well. So, yeah, fair play to him. Another one that's, you know, branching out and going abroad. He's only 31, so fair play to him. Why not? Go and earn as much money as you can. Right, folks, that's it. That's all I have for today. I'll be back tomorrow.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.